Okay, continue.
Mr. Oscar
Yeah.
Harris, welcome
Hey,
to the conversation. Can
good
you
morning,
start out?
Oscar Harris.
Go ahead.
My name is Oscar Harris, FAIA. I'm an architect, an artist, author, and a mentor. I have practiced architecture with my firm, Turner Associates, in Atlanta, Georgia, for about 35 years. And I've worked on a lot of large projects as the prime architect. I'm a graduate of Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and I went to Howard for 1 year, and I went to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. At this point in my life, and I just turned 78, thank the Lord. and I'm feeling good. My health is good, but I spend most of my time these days as a painter. So that's about it.
Well, can you tell us what firms you worked with prior to starting your own firm, and then tell us a couple of the buildings that were most important for you to be a prime on in your own firm?
Well, when I started out in field architecture working for firms in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I worked for a developer first named Paul Kosman. And I worked there during the summertime, actually. I was working all the time. I went to school and then I worked there. And when I graduated from there, we went to Washington, D.C., where I worked with a firm named Neil Green in Silver Spring. And there in Silver Spring, we worked on a lot of housing related projects, especially in the modular area. Of course, then at that time, it was always drawing. I mean, we really had no computers at that point. So I was pretty good at the drawing. I could produce, so I was doing real good there. My thesis at Carnegie Mellon was the methodology of developing security criteria for transit facilities. That was out of Carnegie Mellon for my master's degree. And I was called by a firm, Parsons Brinkerhoff, which is a big international company dealing with transportation on a very large scale, to come to Atlanta. And so I came to Atlanta in the early 70s. And there I worked on the transit system, mostly the conceptualization of the transit system in the front end, how the transit stations would integrate into the fabric of the community. And we did conceptual drawings and that type of thing. And then they raised me up to be a manager within Parsons Brinkerhoff. But in 77 was the date I decided I would want to start my own firm. There was a firm, Turner Associates, out of Washington, D.C. That was an African-American firm that had done work on the transit facilities there in Atlanta. And so I said I would hook up with them. So I made a call and we hooked up. And so I started with Turner Associates in 77 with a tiny little space on Peachtree Street. It was a tiny space, maybe 200 feet with no furniture. I had no furniture. I had no projects. I didn't have any telephone either. So I started there, and when I left Parsons Brinkerhoff, I was getting paid high salary, big, very high salary, and in command. I mean, I was basically empowered by a person there named Pacheco, Will Pacheco. He was a Greek guy, but he empowered me to be the be the person to tell people what to do and what timetables and all this. So, but when I left and got in that tiny space, it was just like a silence hit, you know. I said, what am I going to do, you know? And so I had to get out there and start scurrying around and looking for projects in Atlanta. So one thing led to another, and I began to get more projects. All during this time, as far as the National Organization of Minority Architects, I was going to all the different functions and all of that type of thing. And especially in Atlanta, we were very concerned about the fact that that African American architects were not getting their share of the work. So we worked heavily to increase that with various firms like Joe Robinson and others. So one thing led to another, and I got my first real project to pay the rent was from an engineering firm. They had a fee, I forget the small fee, but I was able to pay my rent for a little while. And one thing led to another, and then we started getting more projects, and I moved into the Omni International. I took space. That was a high-rise building in Atlanta at the time. And I got in there, and then at that point, I was starting to pick up various projects and hire people. And I had a staff maybe about it there. I had a staff of about 10 or 15 people. And I was fortunate that I began this whole process when Maynard Jackson was the mayor. I thought it was a good idea because Maynard was pressing for African-American firms to be in roles that they strong sort of roles. So I thought it's a good thing to do, and that worked out very well. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I started picking up more projects. Now, I always wanted to be the prime architect. I didn't want to be in a joint venture. I don't want to be that. But I started off in joint venturing because it was a way to step up. So I began joint venturing with large firms like Melton Pate was the big guy at the airport at the time. So I joint ventured with him. He took 75% and I had 25% when I started off. And we did various joint ventures. And finally, we ended up being 50-50. And then ended up that I was the prime on fairly large projects, like $100 million projects, that type of thing. So I moved out of that space and I went over to 55 Park Place, which was a real high end at that time in Atlanta, a big office building. And this about 10 years into practice, after 10 years, I was up to about near about 100 people. And I had interiors group and mostly architects. And we were working at that point on some fairly significant projects in Atlanta, like the Underground Atlanta project. At the time was sort of like a rejuvenation of the underground area, which was very popular back then. And I did the Sam Nunn Federal Center, which is a big tower with Cone Pedersen Fox. And the Hartsfield Airport, I just had project one after another. I did the International Concourse. Concourse E is the prime architect. And we had about 50% minority firms on that project because I was the prime. So I called it the way I wanted it. And I had artists, a Black artist involved. So I had art put in the whole project. So it's really an art, sort of it's focused on art. And that whole program spread throughout the airport. And I did the atrium. It's a large central facility where a big skylight. I did that as the prime. And then I was downtown Atlanta. got involved in the look of the games. I was the manager for the look of the 1996 100-year games. They came to Atlanta. I was the manager of creativity. In other words, they had various firms that were involved, and I was to manage their creativity and bring it all together, which worked out very well. And then I had in my firm at that point, I had various sectors that I was working on. Like I worked on public housing. We had a whole group of architects dealing in public housing, and that was renovation of public housing. And I did a lot of that work. And transportation was one of the big areas, and did work in Orlando. I started an office in Orlando for a while and did work in Orlando. And I did work in Florida. I was the prime architect on about 10 stations with a design build company. I think Herzog, I think was the name, as I recall. And then I did justice facilities. These are courthouses and correctional facilities. I didn't like too much doing the correctional facilities, but the correctional facilities, and you had to have them, and someone's going to do them. I had an opportunity to do them, so I did them. So,
were there any innovation in any of the designs that you did? How much say did you have over any kind of changes that they might have wanted to make in incarceration?
What do you mean changes? What do you mean changes?
Design changes for better space, for better.
No, things don't work that way. It's mostly like a formula. Mm. You know, it's formalized. You know, there are no what's the word for it?
Innovation.
It's a very structured thing. I mean, it's incarceration, and they have their own sort of standards and formulas and all this for how things are set up. Mm. Now, I did a women's facility for the state. I was probably the first African American, I guess, to do work for the state of Georgia too, on a very large scale. Mm. And that was a big, large sort of a campus facility. So the inmates were able to move around in open spaces a lot better. Yeah. But
what year was that project? Do you remember?
No, I don't recall.
When I was in school in the late 70s, I was graduating when you were starting your firm in 77. There was a move to make prisons more of a campus kind of environment. And that was my thesis. My thesis was a women's prison in Arizona.
Oh, okay. All right.
I visited five top penitentiaries in my research because an architect who groomed me in Las Vegas was doing a prison in Nevada. And he had 5 wardens to allow me a one-on-one interview. But I went all the way to Illinois, to the correctional facility. I can't remember the name of the town in Illinois, where the people from Chicago, are placed in the state penitentiary. Right. And I saw 2 women's facilities and 3 men's facilities. But now, the reason I bring this up, because now there's a firm in New York working on $1 billion, $1.5 billion prison for downtown Manhattan. And it is a total redo. In fact, they're taking $1 billion to tear the building down, and then $1.5 billion to build a new building in its place. Right. And so now they want courtyards and biophilia. They want places for the children who come to visit with their
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. It's like a whole nother kind of level. But right, they never get to it because the formula somehow seems to supersede any kind of innovation.
Yeah, because the pods are set up certain ways, and you have to work to make them very sort of efficient. I mean, it's not I was not, I mean, I was not happy about the fact that I was working there, but working on those sort of facilities, but someone had to do them and I needed to get the cash flow. So that's the way I looked at it.
No, I understand.
But, so anyway, I was doing a lot of projects and then, so that was throughout, up until about 10 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago.
Mhm.
So I started to wind down then at that point. And I purposely set that I wanted to wind down because I had reached a point where I just didn't want to, I didn't want to put myself continuously through the ups and downs of it anymore. You know, I mean, you can go up real high and go down and ups and downs and all that type of thing. And, you know, and we had to compete. I had to compete. I was competing as the prime architect. So every time I went into the thing, I had to roll out like $50,000 to compete. And then when you lose the project, when you aren't selected, that's $50,000 off your bottom line.
Right.
So it got to be, you know, I said, and plus I was painting, you know, I used to be, in fact, I wanted to be a painter. I didn't really want to be an architect. I wanted to be a painter. And my mother said, boy, you better find something that you can do that'll pay those bills. So then my spirit was about the painting thing. And I just sort of said, it's time for me to roll into this other area, you know. So I just have been painting ever since. It's been really very rewarding. I should have painted more. I should have been painting a lot more. So I would advise anybody that enjoys that sort of thing, drawing or painting, to please go ahead and do it all the time as much as you can, because it's more like a spiritual thing. You know, it helps your brain, helps your thinking process, and it's just a good thing. I really enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I've seen your paintings and they're actually outstanding. You know,
Thank
very,
you.
very conceptual, kind of cultural identifiable, and then kind of universally open. I mean, it's just like a lot of richness and color. Very, very nicely done. And not all of them are in color, right?
Right. I try to get into what I call the innovative creativity zone. No, I'm sorry. Intuitive creativity. And you know, if I can get my mind not to think about it, you know, if I think about it too much, you know, it's like all things. You think about it too much, and next thing you know, things don't go the right way. But if you let the spirit come upon you and you just try to be in this intuitive spirituality zone, and then you're working, it's just like a very good feeling all over that I get. So I try to do that and spend my time in that zone as much as possible.
And where can young people go, interns and students, to see it? Is there a website that your work is on?
Yeah, I have a website. It's just called Art by Oscar Harris. Just put that in Google. Just Google that term, Art by Oscar Harris. And what happens is the pieces that because I'm painting for myself. I don't take commissions or anything. I just paint the images are for me, you know, so I'm creating all the time. So those images are on there. And if someone's interested in that image or wants to buy a piece or wants the image thing, you know, then just call me up and let me know.
Oh, good. So again, is there one project that you designed that you would like to tell us all about? And if it's still there, where is it located?
Well, okay, we want to focus on, I focused on a lot of, different projects. I did the Centennial Park and that, of course, the light towers that are there stand as a symbol of the city of Atlanta still from 1996. But I think if I'm looking at all the projects, and I've done hundreds of projects, I would think that the atrium at Hartsfield Airport would be the one that I would focus in on. That project was a project that prior to me doing and working on it, it was just an open space. It was a hole in the middle of the terminal. And no one knew that it even existed. It was sort of like a donut hole. That would be in other words, the light and everything and rain and everything would go inside of the donut circle. And what happened is we got contracted to fill that in, and we filled that in with a sort of a gathering place. It's more like a town sort of center within the Hartsfield Airport. And that being the case, I'm very proud of that because a lot of people pass through it.
That's
And
when the escalators come together and the food court, the older food court was starting, right? When you
right,
first into the airport.
right.
Very nice.
Right. And that ended up being like a 3-story space and had food court all around. And it has a big skylight in the center. And I just said, I just want a clear skylight. I don't want any, let the sun and everything come in, which it does do. But the most fascinating part about it is in the case of codes, you had to get the people out just in case of fire. So sitting on top of that space, there are these four large fans, which no one ever sees. But boy, if those suckers come on, you go, woo, and it just sucks all the air. It sucks all the air up out of the place just within, about 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, it just takes everything out. And then the other thing about it is that the trainway that goes out to Concourse E and the rest of the concourses run directly under it. So we had to run the columns. There are 4 big columns down. We had to run them down like, I'd say about 4 stories down. And you had to put in the foundations for those below the trainway that's down there, because if you put the load above there, it could easily sort of forces could move the train sort of rails over time. So you had to drill down and you had to go below the trainway, which was way down there, and you had to put in your footing down there. And then those 4 big support columns went up to the center, and that's where the skylight is, and it lets the light in.
Very interesting. I remember walking through there several times. I mean, it's a really nice, great big space. And is that the same space they have exhibitions in as well?
Oh yeah.
They have exhibitions.
Yeah, they have exhibition, they have performers, and they have a piano player, and they have different other things. It was planned sort of like that. And then also the model that I made for that, I made out of foam, the blue insulation you do for your house, the solid blue. You get it 1 inch, 2 inch foam. It's foam for insulations for your house. I made this gigantic model out of that. And Maynard Jackson, I made it so he could stick his head up in the center, and he had to get down and stick his head up underneath of it and look around. I said, Maynard, I'm gonna put this together for you. He said, okay. He was real proud of that,
Yeah, that's great. So in the next
one thing about Maynard, though, I'm gonna tell you this one story. Sorry, I'm out here in LA, you got airplanes flying. Was when I put in for Concourse E, because at the time it was the biggest project. It's a big building, but it's laid down horizontal. It's one of the biggest buildings in Atlanta. And I put in as the prime for that. And he said, you put in for, yeah. And I had gotten all of the firms that had worked out at the airport previous to be as consultants to me, you know.
Mhm.
And these are mostly the white firms, and that was a big thing, you know. So when I got selected on that, boy, he was really and he said that was really really something, you know. And so he wanted my the package that I had put in, and he said, "Oh, yeah, you have to sign this, you have to autograph it." So I autographed the package.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he was a catalyst in a lot of Black-owned businesses getting work.
Oh, he was great
Yeah.
guy. I mean, I would not have a career really if it wasn't for Maynard Jackson. You know, he was really transformational. And then even after that at the airport, I went in after that. I did the master plan for the expansion of the airport. And then after that, I went in and formulated a team to manage all of the design and construction for the airport, which was it ended up being a $6 billion program.
Well, yeah, that's
And
impressive. So in the second half, I want to move to this notion that I've been working on for the last 25, maybe 30 years about a Black design aesthetic, which is very, very important to me and has been important since I left school in my work. And over the last 15 years, we've tried to evolve 10 principles of Black aesthetic design that we follow, not to give to the rest of the world like Le Corbusier or Frank Lloyd Wright, but an idea of how we kind of analyze and evolve certain criteria, which I think is very, very particular to the Black architect, because we don't know our heritage so much as other people do. And
Right.
we're not as documented in all of the wonderful things that we've done. So we can go back to Egypt, but then there's a major disconnect between Egypt being in the north, and most of us from the south of the Sahara Desert, and the idea of what was evolved before the empires of Egypt. So not knowing that and being in the 20th century, 21st century, what does a Black aesthetic look like? Have you had any ideas about that, or was that something important to you? How do you approach that kind of idea and understanding that architecture needs to represent the people it's intended for? How does that manifest?
Well, and you asked me and you sent me these 3 points that you wanted me to hit upon, dealing with what basically you were speaking about. I'd like to start off with the fact as far as the teaching part of this thing. And you asked about what can happen in this day and age, right? As far as the academics.
Right.
As far as the academic part of this moving forward, I think that what has to happen is the truth needs to come out. And I think education needs to speak to the truth of what is basically happening here. The African American symbolisms and all of this have been beaten down so far, and really a 100-year thing has been sort of ripped away. Our history has been sort of ripped away. So in America, if you're an architect, you have to have a client, or you're going to be your own client. The only way that I see to do an aesthetic that is African American or African or whatever you want to call it, is you have to be in control. And that is under 2 conditions. The one condition is you're the one that's buying the land, and you're the one that's building the building, and you're the one that's building this, so you can build it and do whatever you want, and that aesthetic can be whatever it wants to be. That's one That's one situation. And the other situation is you are working for a client. If the client is not interested in that, then you have to abide by what the client basically has to say, because the client is the one in which you're doing it for. So in the way it is today, most of the time you have clients that they're not really interested in that. They're more interested in, they just want the in other words, it's not a focus of their attention. So what has to happen is, number one, we need to tell the truth as far as young people are concerned, and we have to talk about these types of things and what is going on in the past. Usually what happens is, a lot of times African Americans in general, I'm just making a general statement, are not what's the word for it? And they don't seem to have any control of that arena. You know, a lot of times it's what they put up on the walls of their houses and things are like masks or different motifs and patterns and things like that. And they're trying to show that there's a connection to the continent and a connection to their culture. But it's a difficult arena. The only building that one of the primary buildings that I think was very successful is in Washington, of course, for the African American History Museum. That I think shows, because it has the shape, the color, the patterns, the motifs, and was done especially for that focus. But the most of the other buildings around, of which we don't own and we don't control, they're really not interested in that.
And I think you're right. I think that's the thing. Clients, even Black clients, are not interested. But I want to just mention two things and get your feedback on it. Number one, I went to Senegal, first meeting, and I was with the Black architect, and he took me to a restaurant. Mm-hmm. And when I walked into that restaurant, I thought, this is the blackest thing I've ever seen. This is the blackest place. And it was for a white restaurant owner from France, done by a white French architect, Patrick Dujarec. And I said, I have got to meet this gentleman. And they took me to his house, and I sat with him for 3 or 4 hours. He couldn't speak English, I couldn't speak French. We got along masterfully. And I went back two or three more times to meet him. But looking at that building, I'm saying, we really don't know the power that we have, because what we the world is after. It's like Black lives don't matter, but Black life matters, right? And so we just don't know the power. The other people are doing it. I saw a school in Senegal that was done by a Japanese architect, and it was just incredibly Black, culturally inspired. And then the second thing, I started in the last 15 years to look at strategies of how, because I agree with you, I think the clients are not interested in it. How to think about who could be interested in it. And the first, and I have a tier of 3. The first is the Black preacher.
Excuse me, man, I got a cough a minute. Sorry, out here in LA, I have something in the air. Go ahead.
And you got to have that water with you out there.
Yeah, I got that water. Go ahead.
And so the first one is the Black preacher. The Black preacher oftentimes, more often than anybody else probably in the community, wants something that's culturally specific in the last maybe 15 years. So I think that's probably the number one place to go. We've done now 3 proposals for preachers who have brought Black Jesus and all this kind of cultural identity in, and they've allowed us to do what we want. Number 2 is housing, particularly public or assisted housing, because people like the community boards and the residents are demanding that the city agencies that support these buildings let them have more of a say in what the identity of these buildings look like, because historically so many of them have failed, right? And so architects are still not, we're not organized in NOMA or any place else to really push that agenda, because that agenda is there for us. All we have to do is get to the residents and speak to them about what's been missing over the last 100 years in housing, and we have a chance to do something. And then I think the third tier is the way the artists and the musicians have sort of co-opted it. And it's like you said, you know, start with small projects that you can own the land, that you can own the building rights to, so that the design is yours, and speculate, which means that Black architects have to have a degree in design, and we have to have a degree in management, right? Which we will push. Again, the HBCUs really don't push management and developer mentalities in the school along with design mentality. So we have a long way to go, but there's an avenue, there's strategies. How do you feel about those?
Well, like I said, let's go back to the church situation in Black churches. I I belong to two churches actually, but one, there's a tendency within Black churches to not hire Black architects. And the reason why is because they want their church to look like the church that's uptown that was designed by the white architect. And I've seen this over and over and over and over again. So it's sort of problematic. So I think the Black church, like you say, is in position, but the Black church has to stand up and say, yeah, we want this, Yeah. But a lot of times, they won't do it. It gets down to, that the Black architect is seen, even from Black folks, as not at the same sort of plane or the level as the white architect. And that's a problem, a big problem. So that's number one. Number two is like what I was saying, the ownership thing, ownership and control. If you own in control of the process, then you can own the end product. Now, the interesting thing about owning end products is, in a big building, for instance, like, you got to get funding for this project. And then the banks come in, the banks or whoever it is, mortgage companies, and they want to know, well, what is the aesthetic is going to be and all this sort of stuff. And these are mostly the white folks. And white folks are concerned, if they're putting their money into this thing for the financing of it, if it defaults, they're going to have a building with a whole lot of whatever, that is not highly desirable when they have to resell this product. So that's problematic. So we got a lot of, like you said, we got a long way to go. The other thing is that we don't have a lot of Black architects even in the profession. We only have I think it's like 0.3%, something like that, registered architects. Mm-hmm. And someone like myself with my track record and background I think it's 0.01%. So we need more people. That's the reason why I have my Spike studio. And by the way, I want to thank you very much for participating in that. That was very good to try to reach young people to basically get them to see that they have to get out and start their own firms. They have to be in ownership position of their own firm. Because if they don't own their own firm, then what they're doing is they're just working for the majority firm. And after the smoke clears 5 or 6 years from now, the credit does not go to them, but it goes to the majority firm that did that project.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the third question. And that is, in NOMA right now, the top high talented people who are becoming officers at NOMA. And NOMA is still at the top 90+% Black at leadership. But those people are working for majority firms. And I mean the top high quality, high design majority firms, right? Many of them are not lead designers at this point in time.
Right.
They're there because they have such talent. They know the computer skills and the technology skills as Black people in the profession, which is extremely rare, and to have so many of them as well. But there's not one person that I can mention to you to date that is the next Oscar Harris. You know, there's not one.
Whoa, you got to be kidding. There's nobody out there?
There's nobody who thinks that they can take a firm at a time like 1977 and build that firm to 100 people and continue that firm and then give that firm back and then go on their merry way to become a more creative person in terms of artistry. No. But do we have the talent out there? Yes. But I think the focus is in a different place. And I wanted to get your take on that. I think personally that in another 30 years or less, we're going to need another Wendell Campbell and another Noma, because we give over too much to diversity and to equity. And it always, at some point, as you said, 5 or 6 years in, it doesn't include us. We find ourselves out again. But if I'm Japanese, I can go to Asians in architecture. If I'm Latinx or Hispanic, I can go to Hispanics or Latinx in architecture. But if I'm Black and Noma doesn't work for me, where do I go?
Right. Well, I think it's a big, it's a big problem. I've spoken to the AIA about it, and I've spoken on various things. Is we have to have firms that are African-American firms that are getting these projects, because it's the only way that you can grow. I mean, there is no other way that you can grow. Otherwise, all these projects you're doing when you're working for the majority firm, I don't care if you're a partner or whatever, over time, that project, the credit for that project is not going to be about you. It's going to be about that firm. And it's done by whoever, you know, and therefore we lose on the long haul moving forward. And I think that the young people, for instance, like when I started, hell, man, I was scared, you know, I mean, sure, everyone's scared, but you know what scared is? Scared makes you run faster when you're scared. And it'll make you run longer and make you, you know, I mean, when you're scared, it's a good thing to be scared, to be afraid, you know, it's not a bad thing. But I think there's a lot of opportunity out here. I mean, for people that want to do. Now, what I would do if I were younger and I had right about in this time frame, the pandemic and all this sort of stuff, and I have a few people that I'm sort of trying to get to basically jump out there and do what I'm saying. And you have to have a group, or you have to have a few clients that you're secure with, that you can start your own firm, and they're going to support you. And you only need 2 or 3 that are going to really support you. They're going to have projects ongoing. And you want to develop a small cadre of clients, you know, 3, 4, 5, and then you treat those clients like gold. You're there, you know, in the morning, you're there at night, whatever they want to do, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're there servicing those 3 or 4 clients. And what'll happen is you'll grow and you'll get another client. And you just want to keep yourself in a tight, you know, sort of group, you know. And you just work real hard to service those clients. And then you can looking at where you can go beyond that point. But without it, as I talked to one architect up in New York, and I've talked and said this before, if you look at the skyline of New York City, when you fly in, there's not one structure there that's been designed by a Black or an African American. And look at all those buildings. Not one. So that means, the only thing that means is you have to increase the number of young people that are going into the profession. and you got to increase the number of people that are starting their own firms, and that just has to happen.
Exactly. To me, I see that as NOMA's mission, and one of the reasons why I'm not a member at this point in time, because the energy of the direction, which is incredible. I mean, there are over 1,000 students, 2,500 members. They have more money in the bank than they've ever had before. They're solvent. They can pay all of their bills. And then all of these young people are in these majority firms, and these majority firms are supporting NOMA. But to me, that's the 2021 mask, right? That's what's happening. And in a sense, they are stopped at Parsons Brinkerhoff, right? Where you could see beyond that. And you could take a 200 square foot space after being in a company like that and getting paid well and say, no, I got to do this. I got to do this, right? And then be able to build it. And so I hope I'm wrong, but I'm looking for that student who thinks like that, and more of those. And I can't tell you one that I think is going to be a Phil Freelon, one that's going to be an Oscar Harris, one that's going to be a J. Max Bond Jr. I just don't see it, and it's worrisome to me. I don't see it.
Well, I'm sad to hear that. I really am, because
well, I would like to meet you at the next NOMA conference at some point when we get over this COVID thing, and let's just kind of go through and just kind of sense it. And let's see if I'm wrong or right, and see what your take is on what's happening in this organization. Because I think we're going to have, one of the reasons I'm doing all of these videos is to remind all these young people years from now what the legacy is and what they have to go next. They cannot stay in Parsons Brinkerhoff, even though it's cushy. They cannot stay there. They've got to be something, you know.
Yeah, because because the majority firm, from the majority firms sort of side of things, they are doing what if, say, I was the majority sort of person or firm, I would do the exact same thing. I would look, I'm going to try to find somebody that's person of color that really has some sharp talents, you know, and then I can give them a nice sort of salary or whatever it may be, or offer them whatever partnership, and they are our representative. So what do I gain? I gain somebody that's really sharp, that can produce and everything else like that. And then what I have to do is then I have to give a little bit of money to an organization, which is tax deductible. So that strategy is a good strategy from their vantage point, but it's not a good strategy for us as a general people, because we need to get we need to get our talent out there, willing to take chances and willing to get out there. I mean, I'm so happy that I did that, and I took that chance.
Right.
I mean, you know.
Well, that voice got to be out there a little bit more. So we have 8 minutes. Do you have a closing comments?
Wait a minute, I will wait for this airplane to fly over. I'm near.
We don't hear it. I don't hear it.
Oh, you don't hear it?
Yeah, you have good baffled.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's fine. I just hear you. It's great.
All right. Well, Jack, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for having me on your Zoom call.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited about the future, though. But we need to get young people that are real sharp ones to get out there and start their own firms. Please start your own firm. You've started small. You only need 1 or 2 clients and service them, and you'll get more projects and cooler things to do. But you need to get out there and be your own person. And I would say ownership is important. Ownership is it. And control your own thing. And once you get to the project, you know, you want to be in a prime role because you are credited with that. You know, for instance, like with me, like if I had stayed at Parsons Brinkerhoff and I had a great job, no problem. all these projects that I mentioned that I've done, I would have never been able to do them.
Absolutely.
So as time goes by, I'm very, very proud of that.
And not to mention all the careers that you.
Oh,
started.
yeah. I've got so many people that work for me, and they've started their own firms too. I can point to a lot of people that have their own firms that I'm real proud of, and they're doing it,
Yeah, I want you to think about that number. And when we go to NOMA, I want you to be able to tell those students how many firms you birthed because you birthed your own firm.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd like to say as far as the NOMA is concerned, I think you should consider, I think that the organization should consider changing its name. I don't like the word minority because it puts you, that word is not a good word that you're always in the minority. It's organization of minority, you're in the minority. You're an architect, you're talented just like everybody else, And like my mother always said, hey, anybody that you meet, they put their pants on and they put their shoes on the same way you do in the morning. So don't think of yourself in any form or fashion that you're in a minority position, because you're not. And the other thing is be yourself. The other thing I can say is just be yourself, and be yourself and sparkle. I'm reading, getting involved in this painting thing a lot, but the bottom line of it all is that you just have to be yourself, be outspoken, be technically strong. That's what I was, very, very technically strong. And I was outspoken, and I am my own person. I mean, like today, and where I am, I paint. I'm a painter, and I can pretty much tell anybody anything. I have no concern about retribution against what I'm about to say to anybody. I can tell a mayor to go to hell. I tell anybody to go to hell because they can't do anything about me. They can't touch me. And I like that. So I'm a free person. And I got that freedom only by stepping out and doing my own thing. I would not be a free person if I had not done that, because if you're not free, then you can't step out like me. So.
Yeah, that's a great ending. Thank you, sir, so much.
All right. Thank you, Jack, for having me. Blessed.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Let me stop recording for 1 second.
All right. Thank you.